What is going on, IF Warriors? It's your boy Edward V, and today I want to do something special. I want to talk about how darn popular intermittent fasting has become. I'm going to go ahead and talk about that in this video. Stay tuned. So, how popular has intermittent fasting truly become? How do we measure this? Well, simple. Google Trends has released its 2019 data, and intermittent fasting was the #1 diet that was searched for the year of 2019. Now, I don't want to pat myself on the back or anything, but 2 years ago, I started talking about intermittent fasting is becoming mainstream, and a lot of people thought I was crazy for even saying that, but there were certain little indications that I was noticing that it was becoming a bit mainstream. It was being seen on news stations and local news stations, so they were talking about it in a broader term, although it was subdued in terms of the actual studies and everything like that, but it was looking at anecdotal evidence of people utilizing intermittent fasting and having success. But nonetheless, that was elevating intermittent fasting in the public eye. So I did that video saying intermittent fasting is becoming mainstream, and that was 2 years ago when it was still had a heavy stigma on it, where it was considered starvation, and it was still in that realm where a lot of people were very quiet about it. Why am I happy that intermittent fasting is becoming popular? Because it's such a ripple effect when something becomes popular. Now, one thing you can look at with intermittent fasting is if you look at the Google trend, it shows that it isn't a normal fad like every other diet that you see out there. Most diets, they'll have a huge pop at one particular point, and then once that pop happens, it completely drops off, and then nobody cares about it anymore because it was a fad. Maybe some studies came out, kind of debunked the whole fad, and then it was over. Or people used it, they didn't see the results quick enough, or they didn't see the results the way they thought they would see it. Too many people had negative experiences versus people that had positive experiences, and then they just die out. With intermittent fasting, you see consistent growth over the years, and you can even look at this Google trend of over 5 years, and you'll see a consistent growth in that process as well. So before I get into the second implication of intermittent fasting being so popular, so much so that it was the most popular diet of 2019, before I get into further implications of what that can entail, I do want to talk about things that can trigger it. One of the main things that trigger something becoming this popular is something called tastemakers. And what a tastemaker is someone who has a large following that proclaims they do intermittent fasting. This was happening early on with people like Hugh Jackman, people like The Rock, when they were saying that they were doing this. Then Jimmy Kimmel started coming into it, then Beyonce started coming into it. This year, right at the kind of closing out the year, Jennifer Aniston stated that she utilizes it. It's becoming very popular in California and Hollywood. So more actors and celebrities might say that, you know, they're also doing it. The CEO of Twitter was quoted stating that he also follows intermittent fasting protocol. So these things trigger the popularity. Is it the best thing for intermittent fasting to prove that it works or not? No, those are anecdotal evidence. That's it. But it sparks the interest, and then people dive deeper, and then people try to find out what the studies are, and people try to find out what's happening with other people and make their own conclusions, and then people try things for themselves. So it's still good press. You know, and even when they try to say that intermittent fasting doesn't work or it works, whatever, it's still good press because it puts it in the public eye, which is what I said 2 years ago, because there were a lot of, you know, people giving it bad press. But I said, hey, don't worry about this bad press because it still puts it in the public eye. It sparks curiosity. And lo and behold, you know, 2 years later, here we are, and you can see that now intermittent fasting is undoubtedly the most popular diet of 2019 based on Google search. So what's the biggest implication of this? The biggest implication is that people want to create studies that are going to be viewed. It doesn't matter if you're all about the research. You're going to be all about the research. You're going to be all about the science, but you want it to be interlocking with public interest because you're trying to answer the most asked questions or what people are looking for. It will get your published article to have more views, and you want that to happen. that's something that you want to do. So what better thing to continue to do studies for than something that is the most popular study of the year? And it's no coincidence that as the intermittent fasting interest grows via Google Trend, you can also see that the published studies for intermittent fasting have grown. If you look at the bottom right hand corner, those gray bars indicate every single year up until 2019 and how many published studies related to intermittent fasting have been published. And look at that big spike for 2019. So what does that do? That ends up giving us more data. That ends up breaking it down even further. That ends up giving us more information about the protocol and starts to sway public opinion in regards to it just being starvation. We have already shifted. Even the experts that used to say intermittent fasting is just starvation have now at least conceded that, yeah, okay, sure, it's not starvation, but you can pick either or. You can do calorie restriction or intermittent fasting, you'll be fine. So we have shifted everyone from you can't do this at all, are you crazy, to okay, I wouldn't do it because I think that's starvation, to all right, I'm a professional fitness expert and I believe that you could do it, is up to you, but calorie restriction is the same as intermittent fasting. That's what happens with emerging research. Remember guys, at one point, calorie restriction was not the thing. This was back in 1885. Calorie restriction was found through a French physicist that was looking at engines, calories that powered engines back in the 1880s. It was then when researchers started to understand calorie intake for humans, and that's when they started to actually dive deeper in explaining calorie reduction that leads to actually losing weight. So even calorie restriction as the holy grail of weight loss or weight reduction had its inception, had its beginning via the studies. So emerging research is incredibly important. And what are we seeing with these studies? How accurate are these studies? What are the limitations of these studies? That's what matters. And the more researchers start to tackle this question, the more information and data we're going to have out there to know how effective intermittent fasting truly is. And then eventually we can shift people to the point where they understand that there's inherent benefits to intermittent fasting as opposed to it just being the same as doing caloric restriction, because the studies are out there and you can be very resistant to those studies because a lot of people, especially in the nutrition field, in the dietitian field, in the medical field, they're very resistant to new emergent research that literally breaks the mold of what they've known for so many years, what they've studied in their textbooks for so many years, what they got their degrees on. It's very frustrating to see something be completely new like this, and then you have to now plug that in mentally. It's not very easy, but it's disingenuous not to do so if these studies are presenting themselves the way they have been for the past years. I mean, 2019 was amazing in terms of revelations that came from intermittent fasting. For example, the 42 metabolic triggers that were found just from the blood samples of those who were doing intermittent fasting. I did a video on that, and that's just mind-blowing because it shows how it helps actually sustain your metabolism or increase your metabolism simply because of the intermittent fasting protocol itself, not because of calorie restriction. It's independent. Those are benefits that are independent. I'm just super excited that intermittent fasting has grown in popularity, not for some vain reason of just saying, oh, you know, intermittent fasting is popular and it's cool, it's getting cool now. That's one thing, but it's irrelevant to the fact that the more popular it becomes, the more studies we'll see of it, and the better off we will be in terms of data and information. So that's the thing that makes me really happy when I was predicting that intermittent fasting was becoming mainstream, and was proven right via 2019 Google Trend searches 2 years later. Of course, I gotta give myself a pat on the back for that, but really the more important thing is that now we can move into having so much more information that it will eventually become overwhelming. meta-analysis will be able to be conducted with much more accuracy because of all the studies that exist out there. So once again, guys, I am super excited. Intermittent fasting has been proven to be the most popular diet via Google search. Nothing but good things can come from this. It needs to keep pushing itself mainstream. I mean, it is mainstream basically now, but it needs to keep on pushing that envelope so that we can get more and more information. We can actually get people who have these degrees and feel that they are experts in this field of weight loss and building muscle and what have you, and actually understand that cognitive dissonance of like, oh man, this is something that I didn't learn this in any of my classes. I did not learn this at all, but I have to start accepting this. If I don't want to be disingenuous, if I want to have the integrity of science, and science, it has no bias. Science is just science. Whatever it is what it is. If that's what I'm trying to be, I have to open my mind to the possibility of this having its inherent benefits that are unique to intermittent fasting itself. So hopefully we get this to push to those points so that it doesn't confuse the audience. So I'm constantly feeling like I have to do rebuttal videos or explanation videos or videos on studies because there's so much anti-information out there because of the stigmas with fasting. So the end goal for me is for you guys to be able to succeed. That's the reason why the channel is even called Fledge Fitness, because the word fledge is a metaphor. The word fledge means that a bird is finally able to leave the nest without the assistance of its parent. It's finally strong enough to fly on its own. And that's the whole point of my channel and why I give the information the way I do, why I link the studies the way I do, because I want you to be able to be independent of some specific person giving you information. I want you to have information that you can actually think about yourself and break down yourself and then create your own path to success. So if I'm giving you a piece of content, but then someone else is giving you the antithesis of that content, it can confuse you because there's so much information out there. So it's important that we continue to shift people based on the studies, not based on your opinion or public opinion or what have you, or popularity or anecdotal evidence, but based on the scientific evidence that's consistently coming out every single year is very, very positive and very motivating as well. Super happy about that. And of course, I want to thank my patrons from my Patreon, and I'm going to go ahead and put their names right up here. And as always, guys, I'll see you on Wednesday for another FAQ. Peace.